You have a story to tell, but you don't know where to start. Let me show you how to free your story. I teach you how to write and how to dig deep in your soul to release your story and make a difference in the world. Welcome to the Julia Amante channel. We're just meeting. I am Julia Amante. I'm a women's fiction author, and I have a special treat for you today. I have a guest author that I will be speaking with. So I will read her biography and introduce her to you. Her name is Bernadette Walsh. She is the author of 10 novels and novellas. She writes paranormal, romance, and women's fictions. Her books have a common theme of strong women handling what life throws at them the best that they can. She's also the host, or was a host of a podcast called The Nice Girls Reading Naughty Books for over 5 years, and currently has a new excellent podcast for writers called Fearless Fiction. I really recommend it. And I'm very excited to speak with her today. So welcome, Bernadette.
Hi, well, thank you so much, Julia, for having me. I'm really excited.
You're welcome.
I'm a little nervous because I'm usually behind the camera. My podcast is, you can't see me. So I put on a little lipstick. So hopefully I'm not scaring everyone.
Oh, I know. I do the YouTube channels, and it's like, oh, did I wear this shirt like last week? I need to.
Yeah.
I don't like being on camera, but I'm also not good at podcasts. So I guess out of the two, I decided the YouTube is much better.
Yeah.
Okay, so how about we start with you telling us a little bit about you and your current books, what you're writing.
Well, my writing journey has been, it hasn't really followed a straight line. Let's put it that way. I was always a big reader. I always loved reading, and I talked about writing a book forever. But, I was busy. I'm establishing my career, and then I got married and I had a baby, and I was still talking about having a book. And when I turned 40, my husband said, enough already. If you're going to write, like either write or don't write, but stop talking about it. And he bought me this beautiful computer, and he said, don't use this for work. Like, this is yours. I won't use it, and go do something with it. So I was like, okay. So being like a lawyer, I went out and I started doing a lot of research. And I started writing. I started writing a book. And when I first started, it was very dry and it had no life. It sounded like a contract. And I knew there was something wrong. And so what I did was, again, I did a little bit more research, but I figured out that writing in the third person, although I'd love to read in, books in the third person, I know that's probably the most popular way to write.
Right.
But I was just too far removed. And the only way I could kind of infuse life into my characters is writing from the first person, so that in my head, like, I'm the character.
Right.
And once I did that, it just unlocked the door for me, you know what I mean? And so it became much more natural. So my first book was a light contemporary romance, very chick-lit-y, because that's what I had been reading up until then. And it's called Gold Coast Wives. And it's about a woman who was a lawyer, write what you know. And she was about 40. She had one child, and her husband left her, and she lost her job. Like, everything happened at once. And she somehow found her way onto a reality TV show. And I am actually a huge reality TV fan. So it was great. It was a fun book. It was a fun ride. It had some deeper moments. I put a little bit more into it, but it was definitely like a light, fun, contemporary romance. And so I submitted it to publishers, and I found a publisher, Lyrical Press. Really, I think it was like the second or third, submission that I sent, and they decided to publish it. And so, and then I started writing a paranormal series, because I was kind of like finding my way from genre to genre, and they took up that as well. So I was like, wow, this is like so easy, this publishing thing. And then I was like writing book after book. I was really on fire. And then Lyrical was acquired by Kensington. And then once they became part of Kensington, they really they had a whole backlog, and they didn't really do anything with it. And so I was like, well, you know, I'm so great. I could do this on my own. So I took it back, self-publishing. Might have been a mistake because like self-publishing is a lot harder than you think.
Oh yeah.
But I think actually my time with Lyrical was invaluable because I don't think I could have just come out of the box self-publishing. Like I learned so much from the editors. I learned about the covers. I learned about promotion. I mean, really with a small press, I was doing all the promotion anyway.
Yeah.
So again, I was like popping out book after book, and people would talk, you know, on these little podcasts, they would say, oh, you know, have you ever had writer's block? And I was like, writer's block? Like, what's that? You know, I'm just throwing book after book. And, but then, you know, be careful what you say, because I was then in a car accident and I was out of work for a little while, and I was fine. Like I just had a concussion, and but I couldn't write. I got back to work. I could do other kinds of writing, but I couldn't write. And it was like a year or so. And I went to the neurologist. I was like, I used to be a fiction writer. I can't write. And he's like, you know what? You know, head injuries are a funny thing, and it may come back or it may not. So I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe this part of my life is over. And it was really hard, like heartbreaking, because I was like, I loved writing. It was such an important part of my life, such a like a wonderful outlet, and I just couldn't do it. So, so I was like, okay. And then another year passed. I would try every now and then, but it was just pointless. But then it started coming back little by little by little. And it's funny, after that, so I wrote Johnny Be Good, which is a very, very serious women's fiction novel. And my writing really took, after that car accident, really took a different turn, and I think became so much better and so much deeper. So what could have been a horrible thing actually, and ultimately, looking back at my writing journey, was a great turning point. And since then, I really have focused primarily on women's fiction titles. So I just finished one book, which it's titled You Know Yourself, and I'm actually trying to get that one traditionally published because it's longer than a lot of my other books, and I just think it would be, I just think it's a great book. So I'm going to see if I can do that. But anyway, and then now, of course, I finished that last month, and now I'm starting on another one. So gotta keep going. Gotta keep going.
Yeah, I usually have to take time between novels, a little bit of time at least. Okay, so that actually, what you were saying kind of triggered a couple of questions. So first, when you were talking about research, so a lot of writers, you know, I recommend that they do research. Did your research include like reading novels? So when you were saying that you didn't know really what you were going to write, so what kind of research did you do in order to decide what your genre was going to be?
Well, I think I did my research more in terms of the mechanics. That was initially like how to write fiction. Like I actually started with something called the snowflake method. It's not something I need now, but I think it's so invaluable when you're writing your first book, because it just like you layer on with each character and you write out like their different, you know, aspects, and you kind of chart out like how they relate to all the other characters in the book. So it was really, really helpful. I use that for my first book. I haven't done it for others, but then I'm still always reading books, you know, how to write books. How to Not Write a Novel actually was great. I don't have it. I don't have the name,
write a novel?
How to Not Write a Novel. It's funny, but it's so insightful. And I have it in the hard copy, and I've probably had it for about 10, 15 years. And every now and then I'll just read it because it tells you like, it shows like in a funny way, like, all the mistakes that people make. So that was good. And of course I've read like Stephen King on writing, and I read a lot, but I think what also helped me was I joined a writers group. So a local writers group, Long Island Romance Writers. Although I had moved away from romance, I still am part of that group because I think they're really a great group of people. And, you know, and they really, really, I think sometimes you need another writer to tell you what's not working. I think when I first started writing, especially my first book, I gave it to all my friends. I gave it to my, you know, my sister, my brother, and they would say, "Oh, I like it," or "Oh, I'm not sure that works," but they couldn't really tell you why it worked, why it didn't.
Right.
So, you know, so it's
that
was, I think has been really, really important. And I'm sometimes more active, sometimes less with my group, but they've been really important, and they can give information about, just like who to go to, recommendations about who to do cover artists, or, how to promote. And I've started doing a lot more in-person events as well.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. No, I agree. I think just having other writers, especially when you're first starting, is super important. And so were these writers also critique partners?
I did have a critique partner at one time. That never really worked as well for me. And maybe it's because I didn't really have the time, because if you can't be a selfish critique partner, right? They
Right.
critique your work and then you never do anything on their side. So it has to be back and forth. And I just had so much going on with my real life and then my writing life. So it's what works for me better is my writing group has critique groups where we give like little chapters. And so and you drop in and drop out. So it's not like a long-term commitment. I guess I'm a bit of a commitment phobe when it comes to critique partners. So anyway.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. That works. Okay. One of the other things that you mentioned was that you sold very quickly. And so how long does it usually take you to write a book from start to finish?
You know what? It depends on what's going on in my life. And it depends on the type of book I'm writing. Like I can crank out one of those lighter romances or paranormal romances or novellas. Like I can do those pretty quickly. But the last book I worked on, You Know Yourself, which is the book I just finished, that was a very complicated book. It dealt with a lot of like multiple time frames, and it was from two characters' point of view, and it was just really complex. So that took a long time. And I think it just, I think also because I'm not under contract with a publisher, so it's not like I have a deadline. My deadline is whatever I give myself. And so I would rather, take my time. If it's the kind of book, again, a lot of times it's the characters and they reveal themselves in their own time sometimes. And so, whenever I really push it, that's hard. I think usually the first half of the book takes me longer to write. Like I'm at a much slower pace. But then as I keep going, and I kind of get a feel for the characters. And again, like I write from the first person, so I almost become the character. I think then, usually the last quarter of the book goes much fast. And that's been across the board for all my books. So I think my answer is it depends. So sometimes I've done it in 6 months. This last book took me 2 solid years. But I love it. So I really hope that it finds, a good home.
Yeah. No, and that's good. I agree. I think depends on the book. Some books just seem to flow a lot easier, and they just seem to write themselves. And other ones you really need to, depending on how complex they are, you have to take your time.
And it also depends on what's going on in your real life. You know what I mean?
Well, okay. So that's what I was going to say is, so you have a full-time job. You're a lawyer?
I'm a lawyer. Yes.
You're a lawyer. Okay. So that's very demanding. So how do you find time? How do you juggle both your real job and your writing? And how many hours are you able to devote to writing?
Again, it kind of varies. I think when my daughter was young and I used to have to ferry her around to dance and, all these other activities, I used to just bring my computer with me wherever I went. And so a lot of times I would be writing in the car while she was off dancing away. And so that was my little time. It was great because it was almost guilt-free writing time. Like I didn't have to feel bad about not doing the laundry because, oh no, I was taking care of my daughter, but I was also doing something for me, which was great. So I also have a very long commute into the city. So sometimes I'll write on the train, or sometimes even more importantly, I'll plot in my head. I'll just look out the window and I'll think about it. How do I get over this barrier that I'm up against? Like, how do I find a solution for this problem? And sometimes often it will come to me when I'm on the train. And sometimes at night, I'll just do even if I do a half page, that's like more than I had the day before. I tend to write a little bit more on the weekends. And then of course, if I'm on vacation, I'll often take some time. I have
we don't really get vacations, right?
Yeah, I know. I'm doing my other job during my vacation, but it's the fun job, so I don't mind.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think like most writers, like unless you're a full-time writer, and I think that's the vast minority of
Yes.
working writers, you
Yes.
have to just find the time. And sometimes for some people that's getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning. That's not me. I'm not a morning person. But sometimes it's staying up later. Sometimes it's telling your family they have to make themselves sandwiches for dinner. You just find the time, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that's great. That's great. Yeah, I wonder. I have a friend who lives in Jersey, and she's also a lawyer, and she would write on her commute. So I wonder how many people on those trains are actually writers that are writing on those commutes.
Yeah, yeah. What is it? Grisham? He was a lawyer too, and I think he used to write longhand on legal pads on
Yeah,
his way back and forth on his train. So
on a
it's
train also.
funny. There. I've met so many, especially in my writers group. I've met so many lawyers who are writers. I think it's
Really?
that liberal arts, side, and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think what also helps too is to be a lawyer, you're used to using words. That's
Hmm.
like that's your toolkit, and you're
Right.
also not afraid of a blank page. So and you're organized. So I think those skills have helped me as a lawyer. I think
Yeah.
also, my drafting skills help. Like I think some writers are very protective, especially new writers are very protective of their words, right? And
Hmm.
even I can see that in critique groups sometimes. Like I'll say, "Oh, I think this," and they'll be like, but for
Yeah.
me, I'm not that protective of like in my day-to-day job, people are constantly giving me comments. I comment on their stuff. Like it's just
Yeah.
words, right? And you just
Right.
got to
Right.
mold it so it gets to where it needs to be. So I
Exactly.
think I think that skill set that most lawyers have really helps in the writing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, okay, great. So can you tell me about your theme? So how did you come up with your theme? Because I think that's a little hard sometimes for writers, or especially new writers, to think, okay, well, what is it like? What am I really saying? How are my books tied together, or are they tied together? So how did you come up with that theme?
Well, as I said, I've jumped around genres, which is
Hmm.
all the publishing professionals tell you shouldn't do that. You
Yeah.
should stick to a genre and build the audience there. And I really don't. I write what comes to me. Although
Mm.
I tend to focus more on women's fiction. But
Yeah.
if a good paranormal sometimes I like to write about, kick-ass witches. I'll write something like that. But I think most of my characters are women who are facing a crisis in their life. A lot of them are in midlife. And so when I say, it's women dealing with things that the best way they can, I mean, life is hard, right? And
Yeah.
so I'm not really interested that much in writing light, fluffy boy meets girl runs off into the sunset. Like I tackle some pretty heavy themes like
Yeah.
alcoholism,
Mm.
sexual abuse was in one of my books,
Mm.
the death of a parent, life,
Yeah.
end of life issues, you
Yeah.
know, that's just part of life. Now, again, my books that makes my books sound very dreary. I think my characters are very enticing and attractive, and you want to
Yeah.
get to know them. And sometimes they're a little difficult, but I try and write about real women. And I think what is really great about my books, and hopefully the audience, the readers of my books think so as well. I like to showcase women who are somewhat invisible, right? Like you can still have a full life and have
Mhm.
something to say, even if you're not a size 2, 20-year-old, right? I mean, I'm
Right.
in my 50s. And I write about a lot of, I mean, some of my characters are younger for sure. Some of them are older, but
Yeah.
I write about women in midlife who still have very active lives, sexual lives and work
Right.
lives, family lives. They have a lot to give, and they're not invisible. And I think I know I myself sometimes feel very invisible in my
Mhm.
day-to-day life
Yeah.
because you're just not the sexy 20-something-year-old you used to be. So
Right.
I think I like to shine a light on women who sometimes get overlooked. That's,
Hmm.
I think, a lot of
I
my
like that. I
characters.
like that. That's
So
nice. Your women are very strong though, right? They're
I
strong
think so.
females.
I think
And
so for the most part.
what do you think makes them that? Makes them strong?
Well, sometimes you get strong through adversity. Like I
Okay.
said, a lot of my characters have dealt with really difficult characters, and they're strong. I mean, look, no one is strong all the time, right? We
Right.
all have weaknesses.
Yeah.
We try and be strong. So I wouldn't say, they're not like superheroes. They're
Right.
women who, who get, I would say a lot of my characters, they get hit a lot in life, but they usually get up again. So,
Okay.
but you know, I think we're all dealing with trauma. I mean, no one has a perfect life, but how do you keep going? And I think some of my characters have also like been through, and I deal with the theme of regret, especially in the last book I finished, You Know Yourself, but also in the book I finished prior to that, A Safe Distance. One of my main characters had an awful lot of regret about things that happened very early in her life, and she was very scarred in some ways. But how did she keep overcoming? And that's what I think is interesting when they get to the end of the book. How have they changed? How have they still managed to grow and to persevere, I think is really what's key.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. And I agree. I think that we are all strong and we're all vulnerable at the same time. And those, I mean, the reason that we write a book is to have that character transform from that maybe weakness into somebody stronger, into somebody who can take on those challenges of life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Absolutely.
great. That's great. So do you put any of yourself, and I'm like, you're talking about writing about older women, so I can kind of tell like, yeah, you are, you're writing, that's where you are in your stage of your life. So you're writing women that are also in that. So how much of yourself do you put into your characters?
Well, I think there's a little bit of Bernadette in all my characters. And sometimes it's not even so much, even if it's not outwardly what they are, because I don't always write about older characters. I actually write a lot of characters from the mother-daughter relationship. So obviously usually the daughter is the younger character. But, you know, I think you always reflect something. I think there's a lot of myself in my characters. Now, obviously not outwardly. Like I've written about witches, I've written about, all right, lawyers, that is a lot of me. But I've written about somebody, a murderer, like, you know what I mean? So obviously I haven't done all that. But I think a lot of your sensibility goes into it. And sometimes it's what I want to be, what I wish I was. Or, you know, again, I write about the mother-daughter relationship. And it's funny, sometimes people think like, oh, do you model the mother on your mom? I was like, no, my mom's actually really nice. So I don't like, I don't focus on her. But a lot of times, and she was a great mom, but I think a lot of times I put my own insecurities, especially about how I feel that I've failed as a mother, because we all fail, right? There's always something we could do better. So a lot of my own failings, a lot of times go into my characters as well. So it's not just the good parts that go into my characters.
I think I do the same thing. And it's actually, you talk, I haven't written a murder. Have you written a murderer?
Well, not a murder mystery, but I have written someone who has caused, I mean, they're not like, but it's somebody who's, for whatever reason, has been the cause of someone's death. So they themselves feel like a murderer. You know, I don't think a court of law would convict them. But again, like sometimes it's more important what you yourself think of yourself than what others think. So.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No. What I was thinking was, you know, even if you're writing a bad guy, sometimes you do think like, okay, what, you know, there've been moments where you're very angry at somebody. What would I have done in that moment, or what could I have done that would have been really bad? So sometimes, even though you haven't done something, you can kind of put yourself into that situation and say, I would have done this, or I could have done this, or what if I had done this? Well, what would have happened, right?
Right. But sometimes it's great. You get to like put your own stuff in a book. Like one of my, it was a paranormal called See Me. And it was part of the Reluctant Witch series. It was very much, the spark was very influenced by my own life, because an ex-boyfriend who was very important to my life at one point, but I'd lost touch with. He got married. I got married to somebody else, but he died. I found out that he died. And it really was like a gut punch, because I felt all this like grief for somebody who hadn't seen in 20 years. And like, where do you put it? Like, even to talk about it with people, they're like, what are you talking about? But it was a spark for a book. So, because of course, when you're feeling some deep feelings in your real life, if you're a writer, you put it into a book. So in this book, my main character was a lawyer and a witch, and she had all these powers, and she didn't really want to be a witch. She kind of fought it. But one day this love of her life came into her house, because he was a ghost and he was looking for her help. And a lot of like the things that she wanted to say, like, why did this happen? Like, why did you break up with me? Why didn't we work out? A lot of those things I was able to say, I channeled some of the things that I would have said if I had ever, been face to face with this person. So, so sometimes you get to, one of the benefits of being a writer is you get to work out your own stuff,
Right.
you don't have to pay a therapist, $100 an hour. So that works out.
Yeah, no, that sounds actually really cool. Yeah, because who doesn't want to ask, an old boyfriend or something, a few things like that you didn't have I guess you weren't brave enough to ask, or you were too hurt to ask at the time. So yeah, that's pretty interesting.
It was very cathartic.
Yeah. So do your female characters reflect, you think, today's women? So you write older women and younger women. And what younger women, do you think the younger women of today face more challenges than, maybe we did, or a generation or two ago?
It's funny with like social media and everything, everyone, I think in some way, I actually just did a blog post on this. Because I don't know if you've seen on TikTok, there's all these like things about Gen X. Yeah, Gen X like is so great, and like things were so much better back then, and we're like the toughest generation because we were not supervised and we drank from a garden hose. I don't know, all these other things that we apparently did that makes us really kick ass. I don't know. I don't really buy into that, because I think people look into those past like with rose-colored glasses. I think we're all just people, and we all have. I don't think people change fundamentally all that much. My daughter's, a young woman now in college, and I think she's dealing with a lot of the things that I dealt with as well. So the fact that I think the fact that people can put things on phones and take pictures, that's probably not great. But is her experience fundamentally different from my experience? I don't think so. So I think at our core, I think what's around us kind of changes, but what people are doesn't really change. And so, I think I'm very much in touch with probably a lot of the angst that I felt when I was in my 20s and 30s. So and I think a lot of young people feel that. And that tends to go away as you get older. I feel like you become more established, but I think I am in tune with that. So I try and express that a lot in my younger characters. And again, that's something that they kind of work throughout the book. So I'm not sure I answered your question, but.
No, because as you get older, because I'm about the same age as you, and I think to me, sometimes it does get harder to write younger characters, only because I have to remember back, but I'm also a college instructor, and I'm with young people, and so I observe them, and obviously I can't ask them personal questions, but I see how they handle things, and they do have different challenges than we do in many ways, because we didn't have the whole social media phone thing changed everything, I think, and the way that they deal with people, the way they don't talk to people, I think changes. The way that they relate to the opposite sex even changes, because they don't have those conversations. They come into the classroom, for example, and they don't talk to each other. They just sit on their own phones. Where I remember when I was a college student, if there was a cute guy or something, I would talk to. In fact, I married one. We were in the same class. We met in a geography class because we chatted, right? So I think those kind of things, I think maybe communication is a little more difficult for that younger generation. So
no, absolutely. And actually, I have been able, and I think when you text things, you can say things that you would never say in person. And so I actually have in my last book, I had a couple of text exchanges, and it's interesting. The dynamic is different when you're writing text dialogue versus spoken dialogue. So in that sense, I have reflected, I think, today's world.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true. Okay. So let's talk about publishing. You've been both traditionally published and now self-published, and now you're working on getting traditionally published again. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience and what challenges you found in both? Because they both have challenges. Like people, when they ask, like, what is easier? And it's like, honestly, they both have challenges. Both can be easy and both can be hard. So I don't know, what was your experience with both?
Well, I have never experienced what people think is traditional big publishing, right? I was published by, but I was published, they were originally a small independent e-only publisher. And then they were acquired by Kensington, right? And so
Right.
my experience with being with Kensington was they didn't really care all that much about the backlist that they acquired. They cared about some of them, but not others. So I don't know what my experience would have been if I had stayed with them. And I sometimes regret that I got my rights back. Maybe I would have been better off staying with Kensington. I probably would have. But I think around the time that I got my rights back, self-publishing, like J.A. Conroth and all these self-publishing gurus were really advocating self-publishing. And I kind of drank the Kool-Aid a little bit. And
Okay.
self-publishing is great, but it takes a lot of work.
Yes.
And it's really, in some ways, it's kind of a crapshoot, right? If you find that audience or you don't.
Right.
So I think my self-publishing has been great because I do what I want when I want. And that has worked for my personal life as well. Like I didn't have particular deadlines. I published when I wanted to publish, when I felt things were right. And if I took 2 years on a book, I took 2 years on a book. I think was also good for me as the development of a writer was I got to explore, right? I didn't have someone telling me, oh, you write paranormal books about witches. Well, you've written 5. Well, you should write 6. No,
Right.
I wrote what I wanted. And so when I wanted to move into the women's fiction arena, I did that. If I wanted to write about something that's considered unpopular, like a woman in her 50s, I did it, right? If I wanted to write about somebody getting cancer and overcoming that, I did it. If I wanted to write about someone who, tried to kill her husband, I would do that too. You know what I mean? I haven't done that yet, but you know what I mean? So I think in some ways I enjoyed the freedom. And I think as an artist, that has really helped me.
Yes.
But I don't know, but I really would like to find that broader audience. And so again, with my last book, which again, I don't know how it's a pretty dark book, but I think it's really kick-ass. So I really hope it sees a wider audience. I really am trying to get that traditional deal. And, I'm sure you've talked to a lot of traditionally published, even sometimes you don't always get the publishing or the promotion boost that you hope to get when you're published there.
Right.
But I'd like to see. So we'll see.
Want to try it? Yeah. So how do you think that publishing has changed since you started writing?
It's really hard, right? I mean, but I think it's always been hard. I think the good thing is that there are no gatekeepers for self-publishing, and that's both a benefit and a curse, right? Because there's a lot of crap out there. People, if you want to self-publish, you have an obligation to produce the best product that you can. And that doesn't mean you write the end and then you hit go, right? You have to take some time. So I think, so there is an option if you don't get that traditional publishing contract, but there's still no silver bullet. So I don't know that it's changed that much over time. I think it's just, it was hard when I started and it's still hard and it'll be hard 10 years from now. So
yeah, that's true.
But do you want to, I think at some point I love writing. It's something, it gives more to me than so I would love to find a greater audience. I hope that I will one day. I think that I will, but I love writing. I love creating. And so that's enough for me.
It's always good to just try different things, though. You've done self-publishing for a long time, and and you want to try and get traditionally published again. You definitely should try and do it because, you just never know where it's going to go, and it's good to have all the different experiences.
Yeah, for sure.
I did it backwards. I was with the traditional publishers for many years, and then I decided, it's time for me to self-publish and see how I like it. I want to run everything. I want to do the whole business. And you're right, it's a lot of work. But, it doesn't mean I won't go back to traditional publishers at some point, maybe not. So,
what did you think now? What was one of the things that you didn't like about traditional publishing? Like what was you think the biggest
there were actually
hurdle?
a lot of things I didn't like. I didn't like the lack of control. So once the book was sent to them, that was it. My part was really finished as far as like I didn't get any say on the cover. I didn't any say on the back cover copy. I didn't know where it was going to be. I mean, it was traditionally published, so it was in all bookstores, but I found that, maybe there was one in like my local Barnes and Noble, or there was a couple here. I didn't know like where my books were. I couldn't tell people, oh, hey, go here. because there was no way of knowing. Also, all the marketing and all the promotion was still on me. So they didn't really do anything unless you are a big time author. You really are doing it all on your own. That's why I think I decided, well, if I'm doing everything anyways, if I'm doing all the promotion, if I'm the one setting up book signings, I'm the one calling media, then why don't I just do it all? So,
Right. Because especially after you've been writing for a while, like you can produce
right.
that good. I mean, by the time I have a draft, like it's pretty clean, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so yes, it can always be tweaked, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you. And
Yeah.
it's just really hard. But at least you had that audience to kind of,
Yeah.
piggyback off of. And
Right.
and I don't know how much readers really care or are aware of like who's publishing what, right? They kind of just know what's out there. I think
Right.
again, it's just getting your name out there and having
Yeah.
something hit, and in some ways that's just kind of kismet. And
Right.
even the publishers don't know what's gonna hit and what's not. You know what I mean?
No, they don't. They don't. They don't. I will say that it is nice having an editor that will read your work, even though sometimes they're asking you to change things you don't want to change. It is nice having sort of a partner saying, hey, okay, I'm
Yeah.
sending you this chapter, I'm sending you the whole book or whatever, and then getting feedback and having somebody just to talk to. So that is kind of nice.
Yeah, no, that was the best part actually of Lyrical. I loved
Yeah.
my editor. They were great. And again, I was a newbie and they taught me. They really
Oh, that's
did.
good.
So I think it would have been very, very hard for me to go straight to self. I'm glad I didn't go straight to self-publishing. I guess I'll put it that way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So what do you do then to promote yourself? What promotion, marketing do you do to get your name out there?
Oh, it's so hard, isn't it?
It's
I think
very
I
hard.
kind of tried to do especially with my first book. I was tweeting things. I had a Facebook fan page. I was like throwing things on the wall, right?
Yeah,
And I'm not really a great tweeter. I guess we don't call it tweeting anymore. An Xer.
yeah,
I don't know what the term is now. But some people are really great. They can write pithy things that get lots of likes.
right.
They take really great pictures and, they put
Yeah.
that all over Instagram. I mean, I try and do that stuff, but
So
I
social
kind of,
media.
yeah, I tried the social media thing, but I think what I realized was I like to talk, right? And so
Mhm.
I actually was a guest on a local TV show
Oh,
and I had a great time. And that's was like, oh, well, I like talking, like maybe I can try a podcast. So that's why I started the Nice Girls Reading Audiobooks podcast.
okay.
As you said before, I kind of rebranded it and as my focus has changed away from romance. I wanted a broader audience. So
Yeah.
I renamed it. I relaunched it this last year under Fearless Fiction. So
Love
that's
that title.
something, yeah, isn't it cool? So that's something I really enjoy. And it doesn't feel like, I don't know, I feel like promotion shouldn't be like taking your medicine because then you just won't do it. So
Right.
it has to be something, yeah, I think you have to find something, a niche, is that how you say niche?
Yeah.
That you enjoy and then focus on that and maybe be a little deep in that as opposed to like throwing things, like I said, I felt like I was throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what
Yeah. Yeah.
stuck. So I've really enjoyed that. And I learned more from my podcast than anything else. I've interviewed, New York Times bestsellers. I've interviewed
Ah.
people with only one book under their belt, and I get something interesting from each person. So
Yeah, yeah. No, I was actually going to ask you that how much do you learn from other writers that come on your podcast?
I learn
Um,
a little something each time.
yeah,
And it's really even just great to talk to someone about writing because people in my
right,
real life have no interest in
right.
talking about my books. Like they don't care why my characters are strong or not strong. They're like, "Oh, you have a
Yeah.
book? That's nice." So it's great to talk to like-minded people. And so yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I
And I
I
think it's a
again,
good promotional tool as well, because you do get those readers that will go and listen to the podcast, and then they'll be exposed to you and your stories. So I think that's a smart promotional tool.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
do it. I kind of think of my podcast like if people get exposure to my writing and try it out or join my newsletter, like great, that's wonderful.
right.
But I actually enjoy the process. I kind of think about
Yeah,
my podcast the way I think about my writing. Like, I hope that people buy my books. I hope they enjoy them, but I enjoy the process. And so the same thing, like my podcast, I love talking to people. I love meeting new people. And so if people listen, great. If they, again, want to buy some of my books, that's awesome. But I'm kind of trying to enjoy the journey a little bit. So.
Well, that's great. That's great. No, it's a great podcast, and I'll actually add a link in the description area of YouTube here, so that you can people can go and listen to some of those podcasts because they're really good. I've listened to a lot of them.
Oh,
And
great.
yeah,
I'm glad you have.
I gain a
And
lot.
it's a nice varied like group of people,
Yeah, you have
I
a lot of
mean,
different types of authors, all different genres, so it's great. It's great.
yeah. Some people come to me sometimes, like if I read a book and I was like, wow, this is really cool. I'd love to talk to this person. I'll just send them an email and ask them if they want to be on my show, and they are. Or then I have great people like you knock on my door, and that's awesome. Yeah. So
Yeah,
it's
no,
really
I was
cool.
glad to find you. It's like, oh, this
Yeah.
is interesting because there's not a lot of podcasts out there that really focus just on authors and fiction. So
Yeah.
it's nice. It's nice.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Okay, so it's called Fearless Fiction, which again I think is a great title. What does being fearless mean to you?
I think I try and be fearless in my writing. I try and be fearless in my life, but I think at this point, it's not doing the expected thing.
Okay.
It's following your own path. And I think in writing, it's not being afraid to push a boundary. And sometimes for me, that means writing what is true to the character and not writing necessarily what's PC or even what I believe, but what I think the character would say and what's
Okay.
true to the story. And so I think a lot of times people, especially in this day and age, are afraid to kind of go there.
Right.
And in my view, as a fearless writer, my obligation is to the story and to tell the story in the best way I can. And I can't really think about what other people are going to think or say, right? I have to
Yeah.
produce what I think is the best book, the best
Right.
character, the most true to me, and then see how people react. So it's being fearless, in some ways, not worrying about what other people think.
Okay.
That's what fearless means to me anyway.
Okay, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and no, I think that you do have to be true to your character. So your character, not every character has to be likable either. So
No.
exactly, sometimes my characters say things that I don't actually believe. But yeah, you want them to be them and not try to talk through your characters, right? So
Yeah. You want them to be real people, and real people are
right.
flawed, and real
Yeah.
people also reflect their own particular background, their age, their experience, their
Yep.
socioeconomic background. You know what I mean? Like not
Right.
everyone is a PC 20-year-old, right?
Yeah.
Like, and the people talk, again, especially if you like choose, if you, a lot of times my books will go in different time zones. So it'll be back 20 years, back forward. Like
Yeah.
people over
Wow, that's
time
hard.
speak differently. You know what I mean? So you kind of have to reflect that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, so be fearless, be kick-ass,
Be fearless. No,
do
I
it.
like that. You have to be fearless as a writer.
Yes,
You have to, like you said, push boundaries and try different things and allow your artistic self to have freedom, I guess.
absolutely. Yes.
So you write paranormal and women's fiction. So I think people might know what the difference in the genres are, but how are they different to you? And how do you do that? Like, how do you jump from writing paranormal to writing women's fiction? Or is that good because now you can juggle the two different types of writing
You know
and
what?
not
I
bored?
actually think, and I've gotten this criticism from my paranormal books. They're like, it's not really romance. I think everything I write is really women's fiction. And then it's just the paranormal is just like it's women who are going through that same journey through life, but they
Yeah,
happen to have powers or they're, constrained by their own powers. So I don't, if you try, again, I don't write like, it's not like Twilight, like it's not like
okay,
those kind of paranormal books. It's really about normal. And that's what I like about my paranormal books is that the women are very much rooted in reality. Like they have this one aspect of themselves that's different
okay.
from the rest of us, but everything else is the same. Like they have annoying children, they have annoying husbands, right? They have things they have to deal with. So I think in some ways it's not as different as you would think.
Okay, okay. Yeah, well, the one that you described about the boyfriend and the ghost, yeah, I mean, I could see that as women's fiction, but
Yeah, it
with a
really, it was,
paranormal element, I guess.
that's really what it is.
Yeah,
I think that's an accurate way to describe it for
well,
sure.
that's great. That's great. I like that. I can't write paranormal. Maybe I could write something like that, but not paranormal vampires, or what are they? I don't even know if vampires are paranormal.
Yes, I think they're all paranormal.
They're all
So
okay. Yeah, yeah. I like reading those, but
yeah.
I don't have the brain to write, to think of these things. So I love
What's
that there's authors like you that I can read. So
Yes. Well, what's really cool about, I mean, one of the differences in writing paranormal is you are in some ways constructing your own world, right? Because like all my
right.
women's fiction is in the real world, right? So
Yes.
in some ways in paranormal, like, if you put yourself in a corner, well, then somebody could have a power or there is a magic,
Yeah.
you can get out of it. In some ways you can't in real world,
Real life.
but you have to construct that world and you have to really think about like, what are the rules of that world? Because otherwise, if you just all of a sudden, have a magic box that fixes everything in chapter 10, like if you don't build that, then it
Yeah.
just feels like it pulls people out of the story.
Right.
So
Feels like you cheated. Yeah.
yeah, it seems like you cheated. So you kind of have to have like the mindset, what are the rules? My first paranormal series called The Devlin Witch was about a family of Irish witches, and it was really each generation. And being was the Devlin Witch, and you got a lot of powers, but you also had to put up with a lot of, pain, and
Yeah.
it really exacted a very heavy cost from them. So I
Mhm.
think in my books, again, it's not sparkly romance,
Yeah.
sparkly happy witches, doing fun things. It's
Yeah.
actually, it's very dark in some ways, and the people pay a very high price for following that lifestyle, for
Hmm.
following that, that
Yeah.
path.
Very
So
interesting. Yeah,
yeah.
interesting. So, what advice do you have for writers that want to write in multiple genres?
I think follow your inclination. I think you'll find they say that's voice. And isn't it
Mhm.
so annoying when you're a new writer? Like, what does voice mean? But you
Yeah.
will, your voice is kind of what you are and what interests you. And so
Yeah.
if you're interested in trying a different genre, do it, why not?
Right. Right.
Why not?
Yeah.
And you're not going to be good at everything. Like I tried to, at one point I was like, you know what? I want to write like a very formula, romance.
Yeah.
That's when I'll find success. And I got about 50 pages in and it was so boring. I was like, I hate all of these people and everyone else will hate them too. And I'm going to put them out of the misery and I'm going to delete this file. So, in some ways, like try it. And then
Yeah.
you'll know in 50 pages whether you're finding your rhythm or you're not. Like I love mystery. And my mom is always telling me, she's like, why don't you write a mystery? Everyone loves mysteries. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I could not write a mystery. Like I'm not even going to try. I like reading them.
Yeah.
But like even like I have somebody in my writing group, she writes historical romance, and I was like, oh, historical romance, like I don't like that. But her stuff is amazing. And I was like, I'm so in awe of how she makes everything feel so contemporary, even though it's
Yeah.
set in like, I don't know, the Middle Ages or something.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I can admire that, but I know that I could never do it myself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. So then it sounds like what you're saying then is just try the different genres. You'll be good at some of them, you won't be good at others, and just you don't really have to juggle them, I guess. You just write in multiple genres if that's what works
if
for you.
that's what you want to do, but I mean,
Yeah.
I think if you read any publishing, how to publish book, they'll all tell you not to do that. So
Yeah.
it's not necessarily a good idea. In some ways, if I have a story in my head, I kind of follow it.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily a path to, great success as a writer, but
Yeah.
it may
Yeah.
be, I mean, your own personal satisfaction, but
Right. Right.
people say that you should probably pick a genre and stick with it.
Stick with it
But
at least for a while, I think, right? So that
yeah.
you see if it's going anywhere.
Yeah. But I don't listen to the rules. I just do what I feel like doing.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, do you plot your stories, or you take time to, because you said you used the snowflake method when you
I
first started?
did for my first one and it was more
Yeah.
plotted. I think since then, I think I'm a hybrid.
Okay.
Like I always know who my character is before I
Yeah.
start. Like I really get a sense of who she is. I generally know the outline. I know where I want to get to, but I
Okay.
don't know exactly how I'll get there. So I don't say, I think I kind of am a plotter. Like when I first start a chapter, I'll say, okay, I want to do 1, 2, and 3. I hope to achieve 1, 2, and 3 in this chapter. And so I'll write in that chapter. But I don't know that I can say, like, I know that chapter 6 is going to say X. I know chapter 7 is going to say Y. Like, I'm not
Hmm.
that detailed. I wish I was. It would make my life much easier.
Do you know, like, okay, this is the climactic moment. This is where I'm going to end. This is how the
No,
character is going to transform. Do you know that?
no.
No,
No,
wow.
no,
Okay.
it kind of comes to me.
Wow.
And then sometimes, like I say, I think I know how the story will end or where I want to get
Yeah.
to, but I would say probably 60% of the time I don't get there, I go someplace else, but they take me someplace else that works out better. So
Wow, interesting. Okay.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah, I started off that way and I found that I was getting lost a lot. So I'm not a huge plotter, but I do know my certain plot points where I want to go.
yeah.
So yeah, no, that's good that
But
you
I
keep
don't
finishing.
overwrite. Like I think it's been very rare, except my first book. And again, I think you can't really count your first book because that's how you're learning.
Yeah, you're
But I've,
learning. Right,
yeah,
right,
I
right.
rarely, I think the most I've had to like delete is like maybe in my last book, I probably deleted like half of the chapter. I was like, oh, this was like stuff I needed to know about the characters, but no one else really
Yeah,
does. So I hit
right.
delete. But I don't like I know some people really overwrite and then they have
Yeah,
to cut back a lot.
yeah.
I'm not. I think I'm almost an underwriter in some ways. It's harder for me to hit my word count. Like I'll
Yeah.
finish, you know what I mean? So that's why I tend to write very concise.
Okay.
And it was really in this last book because I wanted to be more, I wanted to be in that 80,000 word
Yeah, yeah,
mark. So that's why it took me 2 years to do.
yeah, yeah. Well, it might be lawyer writing that helps you to be more concise. Because
I think I need to get away from that a little bit, right? Because I'm like,
yeah,
I already
yeah.
told that. I was like, all right, well, it's fiction, so you can maybe expand a little bit more.
Yeah,
So
yeah. No, I find the same thing. And when I teach business writing, and I'm always saying, write more concise, cut that sentence to my students. And then I find, oh boy, I can't do that with my writing. I'm writing too concise. I need more description. I need more. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
exactly. So it's so hard to sometimes turn off, those different sides of your
Yeah,
brain.
to
But
go from, your one type of writing style to another.
yeah.
Okay, so how about writing rituals? I don't want to take up too much of your time. I think we're doing okay on time. Uh, do you have writing rituals or how
No.
you light candles?
I
You're a witch.
I
You have a
write wherever
witch thing.
I know. I don't really have a special place to write. I go, like I said, when my daughter was younger, I would
Yeah.
write in my car. I would sometimes when she was at dance, I'd go to the local library right there. I'll write in my house. My dog tends, my daughter left the house, so of course I needed a new baby, so I have a dog. So my dog tends to be with me when I'm writing. But I don't really have a ritual. I just do it when I feel like it.
Okay, okay.
But I think my one ritual is like especially in this last year, I've committed to myself. I was like, you have to write a little bit every week, right? You can't write every
Yeah.
day. I'm not an everyday writer, but I have
Mm,
to get a
okay.
certain number of words, even if I never use them. But
Yeah.
you have to keep it fresh. You have to keep it supple. And I think when because I did do that in times in my life where I stopped just because my life got too complicated.
Yeah.
3 months even at a time where I didn't write. And then when you try and get back to it, it's really hard. So that's the little bargain I made with myself that I
Yeah.
just keep writing.
Just write every week at least sometime.
Yeah, even if it's a blog post, right? It doesn't
Mhm.
always have to be like the book, but
Right, right, right. Okay. So what advice do you have for writers that are just starting out, new writers? What's your best advice?
be fearless, be brave, do it. And try not to be too critical of yourself. I think you have to be open to hearing what other people say. Like don't be too defensive, but also give yourself grace. Like you're gonna have to find your way and just keep at it. If it's something that you love, do it. I think you can't think too much about the end game because that's a little bit out of your control. The only thing you control are the pages that you write. Where they wind up in some ways is a little bit up to the universe.
Yeah.
So really, I would don't think about how you're going to sell this book, how you're going to get an agent, who's going to star in the movie version. Just like don't think about those things, right? Think about
Right.
like writing every day, try and be a better writer, learn more, read all kinds of books. There's so much out there.
Yes.
There's and especially there's so many podcasts you can listen to, my podcast. But no, lots of things. There's so many resources out there. So,
Yes.
be humble when you talk to other writers. You may not agree with what they're saying, but you can always learn a little something from everyone. So,
Okay. Wow. A lot of great advice. I love
yeah.
that. Okay. So where is your future writing? I know you're going to try to get this book that you just wrote. You finished it, right?
I just finished it. Yeah.
Just
So
finished
it's
it. So
on
you're going to try to get
submission.
that
So,
self-published.
yeah.
And do you have other writing projects after that?
Well, it's funny. I found a book that I started probably before I started that book, so like 3 years ago, and I kept it on my computer and I was like, oh, what's the next thing I'm going to work on? And I found this and I was like, oh, I don't know, like, do I like this book? But so I'd done about like 10,000 words and then I must have put it aside. And I started reading it and I was like, wow, like I really like this. Of course, it's a new genre. It's like dystopian, romance or, women's fiction. I don't know, but it's actually a very cool book. So I think, and it's a new genre for me, so that makes it kind of exciting. So that's what I'm working on right now. Whether it'll turn into a book, I don't know. But I've made some inroads on it since I've started. I mean, sometimes I take more of a break between books.
Yeah.
But so it's rare that I pop into something, but because I think I kind of had a head start because I had 10,000 good words already.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of jumping into it a little bit. So we'll see where it leads me. I don't know.
So it's not similar to the one you just finished.
No, it's very different. It's very different. Because I did a couple of like like I did probably about 3 heavy women's fiction books in a row. So in some ways I kind of feel like I need like something a little lighter.
Something different.
Like my book, A Safe Distance, which is my latest published novel, was about 2 families during the pandemic. And it was there's a lot of, they were living on a cul-de-sac. It was a different kind of pandemic. Like I actually wrote it during the real pandemic and I didn't know where the pandemic was really going to go. So I made my pandemic even worse. So it's a little bit different from the, the
How
real
could it
pandemic.
be worse?
I know, but it was. And it was about 2 families who were just kind of stuck on this cul-de-sac and a lot of secrets kind of percolated and there's a little bit of infidelity and all kinds of stuff. So, but it was a pretty heavy book. So I like that. So again, my last few books have been heavy duty, traditional women's fiction. And so doing this dystopian thing, I don't know, we'll see where it leads.
Yeah.
And I'm also writing a very young character. My main character is only 22.
Oh, okay. All
Set in the future. She's only 22. So it's very, very different. So we'll see.
Set in the future. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So since you do write a lot of paranormal and witches and stuff that have powers, I was wondering what your superpower is.
Never giving up. I think that is, I'm a Capricorn. So if you're into the zodiac, right? Capricorns keep going, keep going. So I think that is my superpower. That's not very exciting. I would never, none of my witches are much more kick-ass, but I think you just have to make inroads. And I think as a writer, like every day you can't do a lot at one time. Like, so you just keep going, and never give up.
That's great. That's great. No, I love that. I think that is a superpower because that's the way that you get ahead in life and you reach your goals. So, and not everyone has that. So a lot of people give up too easy, I think.
Yeah.
So how can people get a hold of you? How can they find you on the internet or wherever?
Well, I think you can find all the information about me on my website, BernadetteWalsh.com. And also when you go to my website, if you sign up for my newsletter, I will send you a free copy of A Safe Distance. So you can find out what happens on that cul-de-sac. So again, that's BernadetteWalsh.com. Yeah. And that has all my links. I'm I'm on Twitter, B Walsh Writer. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I have a Facebook fan page, both from Bernadette Walsh and also for Fearless Fiction. So, so really, it's very easy to find me.
All right. Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, it was really, really great to talk to you. We spoke on your podcast. So it was wonderful to have you back or to have you on my YouTube channel. I enjoyed talking to you and thanks again.
Oh, thank you. This has been an absolute pleasure. So I really appreciate it.